I'm Faith, 34 years old, and for 12 consecutive months, my own family branded me a thief, a schemer, and a cold-hearted woman who preyed on a frail, dying man. My sister Brooke spearheaded the accusations. My mother fully supported her. Half my relatives accepted the claims without hesitation. I endured an entire year submerged in voicemails, texts, and family events filled with hushed remarks behind my back, all because my grandfather bequeathed me his cabin. What none of them understood was this. Grandpa didn't simply leave me real estate. He left a letter composed the very day he revised his will. In it, he detailed precisely what he overheard my sister say during his 80th birthday celebration. Words so vicious they shattered his heart. Before I share what truly unfolded, if you're enjoying this story, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if it resonates with you. And leave a comment below. Where are you tuning in from, and what time is it there right now? Now, let me transport you back 14 months to the night everything shifted forever. The call arrived at 3:47 a.m. I was midway through a grueling 12-hour night shift at St. Andrew's Hospital, monitoring vitals for a patient in room 412, when my phone vibrated inside my scrub pocket. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Then I glimpsed the caller ID. Mom. My mother almost never phoned me, certainly not at 3 a.m. or really at any hour. I slipped into the hallway, my stomach already dropping. Faith? Her tone was detached, almost mechanical. Your grandfather passed away an hour ago. Come home. The line went silent. I stood frozen, phone still against my ear, hearing only emptiness. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed steadily. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped rhythmically, and the floor seemed to sway beneath me. Grandpa Walter was gone. He had been the sole person in our family who genuinely recognized me. While my parents celebrated Brooke's glamorous marketing career and upscale way of life, Grandpa would sit beside me on the cabin porch and say, "You're the one who actually shows up, Faith. That's worth far more than any fancy title." During my final visit 3 weeks earlier, he'd gripped my hand with unexpected firmness. "You're the only one who stays with me," he'd murmured. "Remember that?" At the time, I hadn't fully grasped it. Now I did. I requested emergency leave and drove 4 hours through the night. When I reached my mother's driveway at first light, Brooke's white Lexus already occupied the best parking spot right by the entrance. Of course it did. My mother opened the door before I could even knock. She gazed past me rather than at me. "Took you long enough," she remarked. "Brooke's been here since midnight." I forced down the sharp reply rising in my throat and stepped inside, where my sister was already planning arrangements with my mother, as though Grandpa had been merely an issue to resolve, instead of a loved one to grieve. The funeral drew a standing room-only crowd. Grandpa Walter had resided in this town for 63 years. He'd coached Little League, served as a volunteer firefighter, and quietly lent money to neighbors who rarely repaid him. The community adored him. Everyone, it seemed, except those who should have cherished him most. I lingered in the far corner of the reception hall, observing my sister glide through the room. Brooke wore a sleek black designer dress that likely exceeded my monthly rent. She patted her eyes delicately with a silk handkerchief, receiving embraces and soft sympathies like royalty in mourning. "She must be heartbroken," I overheard Cousin Linda murmur to Uncle Robert. "She was always so close to Walter." Close. Brooke had visited Grandpa exactly twice in 5 years. I made the drive to his cabin every single week. Still, I said nothing. What would have been the use? Then a gentle hand rested on my elbow. Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister, the one family member who refused to take sides. "I know," she whispered, eyes fixed elsewhere. "I know you were the one who truly cared for him, Faith." My throat constricted. Words failed me. "He knew it too," she added, softly. She gave my arm a reassuring squeeze and melted back into the gathering. Later, my mother took the podium to speak about family and heritage. She highlighted how deeply Brooke had adored her grandfather, recounting Sunday dinners and cherished holiday customs. My name never crossed her lips, not once. I remained in the rear row, hands clasped tightly, allowing silent tears to fall. Not from being overlooked, I had long grown accustomed to fading into the background in this family. I wept because Grandpa had been the only one who ever made me feel visible, and now he was gone. 1 week after the service, we convened in Harold Brennan's modest law office. Harold, Grandpa's attorney of 30 years, was a silver-haired gentleman with gentle eyes and a voice smooth as warm honey. He had managed Grandpa's affairs since before my birth. My mother claimed the central chair. Brooke sat to her right, tapping polished nails against an expensive purse. I chose the seat farthest from them both. "Thank you for being here," Harold began, settling his reading glasses. Walter was quite precise about his intentions. He covered the routine provisions first. Grandpa's savings, roughly $42,000, divided equally between his two granddaughters, with personal belongings assigned per a separate inventory. Then he paused, lifting his gaze straight at me. "And lastly, concerning the cabin property on Miller Lake." Brooke leaned in eagerly. My mother stiffened. "Walter has left the cabin, the surrounding land, and all its contents exclusively and completely to his granddaughter, Faith Sinclair." A stunned hush fell. Then Brooke sprang upright. "That's impossible," she snapped, voice fracturing. "There has to be an error. Grandpa would never—" "There is no error, Miss Sinclair," Harold replied evenly, yet decisively. "This will was revised 11 months prior to Walter's death. It is fully valid and embodies his clear directives." My mother swiveled to fix me with a glacial stare. "You knew about this?" she demanded. "I didn't," I breathed, barely audible. "I promise I had no clue." Brooke's expression contorted. "This is absurd. She must have—" "Miss Sinclair," Harold interjected, calmly, "your grandfather was fully competent. I personally witnessed the execution." The room seemed to contract around me. Breathing became difficult. Grandpa had left me the cabin. Only me. But why? The instant we exited the law office, my mother seized my arm. "We need to talk," she said, her grasp like steel. "Privately." She dragged me around the corner of the building, out of sight from Harold's window. Brooke trailed close behind, her heels striking the pavement in sharp, measured clicks like a ticking clock. "You're going to share that cabin with your sister." My mother's voice carried absolute finality. "That's what family does." I tried to free my arm. Her fingers tightened. "Mom, Grandpa made his choice." "His choice was mistaken." She released me at last, but her stare remained glacial. "He was elderly, confused. You were the one constantly around him. Who knows what ideas you planted?" The words struck like an open hand. Then Brooke moved closer, and her whole presence transformed. The fury from the lawyer's office vanished. In its place appeared the fragile, wounded sister, voice soft, quivering with carefully rehearsed hurt. "Faith, I don't want to argue." She extended her hand toward mine. "I just want us both to hold on to memories of Grandpa. That cabin meant something to every one of us." I wavered. Perhaps I was being unfair. Perhaps. "I'm not asking you to surrender it completely," Brooke went on, her tone now smooth and sweet. "Just share it. Put both our names on the deed. That's reasonable, isn't it?" For a fraction of a second, something cold and assessing flashed in her gaze. "You can come whenever you like, stay as often as you want, but I won't alter the deed." Brooke's composed expression flickered, only for an instant. "Who mentioned selling?" Her voice gained an edge. "I only want what's fair." And there it lay exposed, the real word she had been dancing around: selling. She didn't crave memories. She didn't value Grandpa's legacy. She wanted the cash. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and let the past flood back. The cabin on Miller Lake was never merely a structure. It was 5 decades of family history etched into sun-bleached pine and groaning floorboards. I was 8 the first time Grandpa led me to the dock to fish. I can still see the dawn mist drifting over the water, still feel his steady hands patiently freeing my line from the branches after a wild cast. "This lake is where your grandmother learned to swim," he told me, "and right there on that porch is where I proposed." She answered yes before the question was halfway out. Grandma died when I was 12. Her face has faded in my memory, but the cabin endures. Her quilt remained draped across the beds. Her handwritten recipe cards stayed tucked inside the kitchen drawer. And my father. Dad was killed in a car crash on a rain-slicked road when I was 12. He was only 39. Yet before that night, some of my happiest moments with him unfolded at the cabin. He taught me to skip stones across the surface. He hoisted me onto his shoulders and marched to the water's edge, pretending to toss me in while I squealed with delight. The cabin was where Dad took his first steps, where he spent every childhood summer. If Brooke sold it, every trace would disappear. A developer would raise it, erect a sleek vacation rental, and charge strangers hundreds a night to sleep in the very place where my grandmother once dreamed and my father learned to walk. I couldn't allow that. Grandpa used to say, "This cabin isn't about money, Faith. It's about remembering who we are." I whispered the words into the darkness of my empty apartment. "I won't let them take it, Grandpa. I promise." I had no clue how fiercely I would have to fight to keep that vow. The onslaught began 3 days later. At first, it was only my mother, a text each morning, a voicemail each evening. "I didn't raise you to be selfish, Faith. Your grandfather would be heartbroken at your behavior. Call me. We need to handle this like grown-ups." Then Brooke joined the chorus. Her messages stretched longer, more deliberate. "I can't believe you're willing to let a cabin rip this family apart. Is a piece of property really worth more than your own sister?" By the second week, the wider family had been activated. Cousin Linda, Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia in Ohio, whom I'd seen exactly twice in my life. "Faith, sweetheart, I heard about the cabin issue. Family matters more than any building." 7 or 8 messages daily, sometimes more. After the first month, I stopped keeping count. At the hospital, I struggled to concentrate. My supervisor pulled me aside after I almost administered the wrong dose to a patient. "Faith, are you all right? You've seemed distracted lately." "I'm okay," I lied, "just exhausted." At night, I would lie in bed staring at the glowing screen as the alerts accumulated. Each one felt like a small blade. "Brooke, Mom cried herself to sleep because of you. Proud of yourself?" "Mom, your grandmother would be in tears if she could see what you've turned into." "Cousin Linda, I always thought you were the kind one. Apparently, I was mistaken." Some nights, the doubt crept in. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was destroying the family over an old house. Maybe Grandpa misjudged. Then I would close my eyes and feel his hand clasping mine, hear his quiet voice again. "You're the only one who sits with me, Faith." And I would grit my teeth and endure one more day. The call came at 11:47 p.m. I had just staggered home from a double shift, 12 hours upright, 3 emergencies, 1 patient coding right in front of me. My hands still trembled as I fumbled the key into the lock. The phone rang. Mom. I nearly ignored it, but that ancient, relentless guilt made me answer. "Faith," her voice was heavy, shaking. "I can't sleep. This is destroying me." I slumped against the kitchen counter, too drained even to sit. "Mom, it's almost midnight." "Your sister is breaking," she cut me off. "She isn't eating. She isn't sleeping. She loved your grandfather every bit as much as you, and you're treating her like she doesn't exist." I pressed my palm hard against my forehead. "Mom, I told her she could visit any time. I offered to share the memories." "Listen to yourself." Her volume climbed. "You sound like an attorney. When did you turn so heartless? When did you stop caring about your family?" Each sentence landed like a calculated blow. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to respect what Grandpa wanted." What Grandpa wanted? She gave a short, bitter laugh. You think you understood him better than his own daughter? Better than Brooke? Yes, I thought fiercely, but the words stayed locked behind my teeth. Silence stretched thin and taut. Then my mother's voice dropped to something icy and conclusive. I don't recognize you anymore, Faith. Your father would be ashamed of you. The call ended. I stood motionless in the shadowed kitchen, phone still clutched to my ear, hearing only dead air. Slowly, I sank against the cabinets until I reached the floor and cried until exhaustion emptied me completely. My mother had always known precisely where to aim, and she never once missed the mark. 2 weeks later, she summoned me to the house. A family meeting, she called it. Just the three of us, she said, so we could discuss things like civilized adults. I should have recognized the trap. I stepped into her living room and found Brooke already enthroned in the armchair, legs elegantly crossed, face a mask of serene composure. My mother stood beside the fireplace like a commander inspecting the field before battle. Sit down, Faith. Mom motioned toward the couch. Let's handle this maturely. I sat. I waited. Brooke spoke first, her voice coated in artificial calm. I don't want to keep fighting. I only want what's fair. Then respect Grandpa's wishes, I replied softly. His wishes were influenced. Brooke leaned forward slightly. He wasn't thinking straight toward the end. My stomach lurched. Are you saying he was mentally incompetent? No one's saying that, Mom cut in swiftly. We're simply pointing out that you were with him constantly. You could have what? I kept my tone even, though my hands trembled in my lap. Manipulated a dying man? Is that what you believe I did? Silence settled like frost. Brooke glanced away. Mom pressed her lips into a thin line. No one's accusing you, Brooke said at last, but her eyes told the opposite story. I rose to my feet. You are accusing me. You've been accusing me for weeks. I reached for my purse. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. If you can't accept that, then this conversation ends here. Faith, Mom stepped toward me. No, I raised my hand. I've spent my entire life yielding, keeping the peace. Not anymore. I walked out the front door without turning back. My hands shook the whole drive home, but for the first time in weeks, a different emotion burned beneath the hurt. Anger. Clean, bright anger. 3 days later, I drove to Aunt Margaret's small bungalow on the outskirts of town. She was the only relative who hadn't enlisted in the campaign against me, the only one who still picked up my calls without ulterior motive. 30 years of rose bushes framed her porch. When I pulled into the driveway, she was already waiting there, 2 steaming mugs of tea in her hands. You look awful, she said plainly. Come in. We settled at her kitchen table. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the floor. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Margaret set her cup down. Faith, there's something I need to tell you. I met her gaze. Last year, I helped your grandfather install a security system at the cabin. Cameras. Cameras, I frowned. Grandpa despised technology. He did, but he mentioned strangers wandering near the property, asked me to set it up. She held my eyes. I always suspected there was another reason. My pulse quickened. What kind of reason? Margaret shook her head gently. I'm not certain, but Walter was sharp, Faith, sharper than most people realized. He noticed things, saw things. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You should go to the cabin. There may be something there he intended for you. Like what? I don't know, but your grandfather loved you more deeply than anyone in this family, and he wasn't the sort to leave you unprotected. Her words circled in my mind the entire drive home. Cameras. Something left for you, not defenseless. What had Grandpa witnessed? What did he want me to discover? The following Saturday, I made the drive to the cabin, my first visit since his death. I had avoided it until then, dreading the emptiness of those rooms without him, but Aunt Margaret's quiet urging had become impossible to ignore.
The cabin stood unchanged, silver-gray pine walls worn by decades of sun and weather, the porch where Grandpa used to sip his morning coffee, the long dock reaching across Miller Lake like an open hand toward the sky. Inside, the air carried the familiar scent of cedar and aged paper. Grandma's quilt still draped the beds. Her recipe cards remained in the tin box beside the stove. I drifted toward Grandpa's study at the back, a small, quiet room where he had read, written, and thought for hours. His desk faced the window overlooking the water. I eased into his chair, fingertips tracing the smooth, worn grain of the wood. Then I opened the top drawer. Loose papers, old receipts, a faded photograph of Grandma, and beneath all of them, a plain white envelope with my name in Grandpa's deliberate handwriting. For faith to be opened when you need strength. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside lay a single handwritten letter dated 11 months before his passing, the same date Harold had cited when he announced the revised will. I began to read. Dear Faith, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and they're making things difficult about the cabin. I knew they would. That's why I'm writing while my mind remains clear and my hand steady. There's something you need to know about your sister, something I witnessed with my own eyes. I stopped breathing. What had he seen? 2 months after the will was read, Aunt Patricia hosted a birthday dinner at her home. I nearly skipped it. Staying away would only fuel their narrative. See, she's avoiding us. Guilty conscience. So I went. I arrived 20 minutes late. My hospital shift had overrun. The instant I crossed Patricia's threshold, I felt it, that heavy, particular hush that descends when everyone has just been discussing you. Brooke stood in the center of the living room, encircled by cousins and aunts. She broke off mid-sentence when she noticed me. Faith! Her smile stopped short of her eyes. We were just talking about the cabin situation. I kept my voice level. Were you? I was explaining to everyone how you won't even consider sharing. Brooke tilted her head, the picture of injured innocence. After everything Grandpa did for both of us, 20 pairs of eyes swung toward me, judging, expectant. I'm honoring Grandpa's wishes, I said quietly.
He made his decision. Brooke let out a sharp, brittle laugh, the kind she'd perfected over years. See, she doesn't care about family. She turned to face the room, arms slightly open as if addressing an audience. She only cares about real estate. A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered something too low for me to catch. Cousin Linda stepped closer, voice soft but probing. Faith, honey, is it really true you're keeping the entire cabin? Grandpa left it to me, I said. Yes. And you won't even share with your own sister? I opened my mouth to explain. The open visits, the shared memories, what the cabin truly represented. But Brooke cut through before a word could land. She's changed, she declared to everyone listening. Money changed her. The accusation landed like thrown rocks, heavy and bruising. I snatched my purse, throat tight. I didn't trust my voice not to break. I should go, I managed. I slipped out before the tears could fall in front of them, but Brooke's voice chased me down the hallway anyway. See what I mean? That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor and read Grandpa's letter from the first word to the last. The opening was tender. He spoke of his deep love for the cabin, his life with Grandma, his quiet hope that I would keep it standing for generations yet to come. Then the tone darkened. Faith. At my 80th birthday party, something happened I never told a soul. It was around 9 o'clock. The party was dying down. My back ached, so I stepped outside for air. I walked around to the side porch, the one facing the lake. That's when I heard voices. It was Brooke. She was talking to that friend of hers, the blonde one with the loud laugh. They stood by the railing, smoking cigarettes. They didn't realize I was there. My hands trembled so violently I could scarcely hold the page steady. She said, God, how much longer is he going to hang on? This place is worth at least $350,000. Her friend laughed. Then Brooke said, and I will never forget these exact words, I wish he would just die already so we can finally cash out.
I stood in the shadows, listening to my own granddaughter wish me dead. I didn't confront her. What would have been the point? But the following week, I phoned Harold and revised my will. The cabin is yours, Faith. Not because Brooke doesn't deserve it, though she doesn't, but because you were the only one who ever saw me as a person, not a burden, not a price tag, just your grandfather. P.S. Check the security system. I recorded everything. I set the letter down. My chest felt carved out, hollow. Grandpa had stood alone in the dark and heard his granddaughter wish for his death, and he had kept that wound entirely to himself. The next morning, I drove straight back to the cabin. On the way, I called Aunt Margaret. "The security system," I said. "Where does the footage save?" She paused only a moment. "There's an external hard drive. He kept it in the study closet, inside an old shoebox." I found it exactly as she described, a small black drive, lightly coated in dust but undamaged. I plugged it into my laptop with unsteady fingers. The interface was straightforward, files sorted by date. I scrolled to the night of Grandpa's 80th birthday, located the exterior cameras, selected 9:47 p.m. and pressed play. The video was grainy, yet unmistakable. The side porch appeared. Two figures leaned against the railing, cigarette tips flaring orange in the night. Brooke and her friend Jessica. I turned up the volume. "Honestly, the upkeep on this place must be insane," Jessica's voice crackled. "Tell me about it." Brooke exhaled smoke in a long plume. "And he just sits here rotting while the property loses value every year. Can't you just talk to him?" Brooke snorted. "He's stubborn, won't sell, won't even discuss it." A beat of silence. "What's the place worth?" Jessica asked. "At least $350,000, maybe more with the lakefront." "Damn." Another pause. Then Brooke's voice, cold and crystalline. "God, I wish he would just die already so we can finally cash out." Jessica laughed. "Morbid, but fair." "I'm serious. The longer he lingers, the more money we're bleeding." I stopped the playback. My hands were no longer shaking. Something inside me had shifted, cooled into certainty. I copied the file to 3 separate USB drives, then emailed backups to myself from 2 different accounts. Brooke believed she could bury the truth. She had no idea who she was facing. 1 week later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mr. Henderson, the nearest neighbor to the cabin. "Faith, it's Bill Henderson down the road." His tone was troubled. "I saw someone at your grandfather's place earlier. Didn't look like you." Ice slid through my veins. "What did they look like?" "Blonde, drove a white car, fancy looking." Brooke. I called the police and sped to the cabin. A deputy was already on scene when I arrived, notepad in hand. No forced entry, but someone definitely went through the house. Drawers yanked open, closets turned out. I stepped inside. My pulse hammered. The study was in ruins, papers strewn across the floor, books toppled from shelves. The top drawer of Grandpa's desk, the one that had held the envelope, was empty. The original letter was gone. I stood in the wreckage and felt a dark, mirthless laugh rise in my throat. Brooke had come searching for the letter. Somehow she must have suspected Grandpa had written it down. Perhaps she'd seen him working on it and dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man. Now she understood it was far more dangerous. The deputy watched me carefully. "Ma'am, is anything valuable missing?" "Just a letter, a personal letter for my grandfather." "Do you have any idea who might have taken it?" I met his gaze evenly. I wore a simple black dress. Tucked in my coat pocket were a photocopied letter and a USB drive. The memorial dinner was hosted at my mother's house. When I arrived, the driveway overflowed with cars. Laughter and overlapping voices drifted through the glowing windows. I paused on the front steps, fingers resting on the doorknob. This was the moment. 1 full year of accusations, of hushed insults and deliberate cold shoulders, of being branded heartless, selfish, a thief. Tonight it would conclude, one way or the other. I stepped inside. The living room brimmed with people. Candles danced along the mantel beside a framed photograph of Grandpa. Guests balanced plates of food and glasses of wine. The air carried the warm scent of roast chicken mingled with expensive perfume. Brooke noticed me first. She stood near the fireplace, poised and at ease. Why wouldn't she be? She believed she had destroyed the letter. She thought the truth was safely buried. My mother approached before I could even remove my coat. "Faith?" Her voice carried clearly across the room. Several conversations faltered. "After an entire year, have you finally reconsidered your stance on the cabin?" I met her gaze steadily. Then I glanced at Brooke, who watched with barely veiled smugness. "I've thought about it a great deal, actually," I said evenly. "In fact, there's something Grandpa wanted everyone to understand." Brooke's smile wavered for the first time. "Since we're all gathered here together," I continued, "I believe now is the right moment. Now, I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever found yourself in a moment like this, when your own family has turned against you, when you're holding a truth powerful enough to shatter everything you've endured, you know exactly what Faith is experiencing right now. What would you do? Would you read the letter aloud, or would you walk away to preserve whatever fragile peace remains? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear them. And if this story has resonated with you, please hit that like button. It truly helps. Now, back to the memorial dinner. I reached into my coat pocket and drew out the letter. The room fell utterly still. "Grandpa left me a letter," I said, my voice calm and clear. "He wrote it on the same day he revised his will. I discovered it at the cabin, inside his desk drawer." Brooke's face lost all color. "Where did you—" she began. "Someone broke into the cabin last week and took the original," I said, looking straight at her. "But I had already made copies." My mother stepped forward. "Faith, what exactly is this about?" "It's about the truth, Mom." I unfolded the paper. "Something Grandpa wanted all of you to hear." I began to read aloud. "My dear Faith, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and they're making things difficult about the cabin. I knew they would." I continued through the gentle opening passages. The room remained hushed. Then I reached the critical part. I heard Brooke say, "God, how much longer is he going to hang on? This place is worth at least $350,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A wine glass slipped from someone's fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor. No one moved to sweep up the pieces. Then Brooke said, and I will never forget these words, "I wish he would just die already so we can sell this place." Brooke surged to her feet. "That's a lie," her voice fractured. "She fabricated it. She forged that letter." I folded the paper with deliberate care. "I also have video evidence. Grandpa installed security cameras at the cabin last year. The entire conversation was recorded." A profound silence descended. My mother's face turned ashen. Aunt Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth. Uncle Robert stared at Brooke as though seeing her for the first time. "I didn't want to do this," I said quietly, "but you gave me no option." Brooke was trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "Mom, tell them she's lying." But our mother said nothing. The quiet stretched on, heavy and unbearable. Then my mother slowly turned to face Brooke. The look on her face was not anger, something far more devastating. "Tell me she's lying," her voice said, barely audible. "Look me in the eye and tell me you never said those words." Brooke's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was stressed that night," she whispered. "I didn't mean it literally. I was just venting." "Venting?" Uncle Robert's voice rose incredulously. "You wished your own grandfather dead for money? How is that not literal?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Brooke?" Aunt Margaret stepped forward. "Because Walter asked me to help him install those cameras. He told me he'd seen something that broke his heart. I didn't understand at the time. I do now." Brooke's eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for any ally. Every face remained closed, unyielding. Her fiancé, Craig, stood near the back wall. He'd been silent all evening. Now he set his glass down with a sharp, final clink. "I think I need some air," he said flatly. He walked straight out the front door without glancing at Brooke. Craig, she started after him. Let him go, my mother said. Her voice sounded 20 years older in those few seconds. Let him go, Brooke. Then she turned to me. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I defended her for a full year, she said softly. A whole year. I called you names. I said unforgivable things. And all this time. She couldn't finish the sentence. Brooke stood isolated in the center of the room, encircled by family members who now regarded her as a stranger. For the first time in my life, I saw my sister with no one standing beside her. I wish I could say it felt satisfying. It didn't. I rose slowly, gathering my coat. The room stayed frozen, 22 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting. I kept my tone low and measured, the same voice I used when delivering hard news to patients' families. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I looked slowly around the room. I came because for 12 months I've been labeled a thief, a manipulator, a heartless woman who exploited a dying man. No one spoke. Grandpa left me the cabin because he trusted I would protect it, because I was the one who visited every week, because I was the one who sat with him through sleepless nights. My voice caught for a moment. And because he knew some people only saw him as a price tag. I turned to Brooke. She seemed smaller now.
Mom, I love you. My voice stayed steady, even as my chest tightened. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove I'm good enough. I drew a slow breath. But I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. I need you to see me, really see me, not as the disappointing daughter, not as Brooke's shadow, as Faith. My mother's lips quivered. She lifted a hand toward me, then let it fall uselessly to her side. I need time, I said. We all do. I walked to the door, paused with my fingers curled around the knob. The cabin will remain in the family. Anyone who wants to visit and honor Grandpa's memory is welcome. I didn't turn around. But from now on, I decide who that includes. I stepped out into the sharp night air. I didn't look back. The aftermath arrived faster than I'd anticipated. 3 days after the memorial dinner, Aunt Margaret called with the news. Craig ended the engagement, she told me, packed his bags and left Brooke's apartment yesterday. I closed my eyes. How is she? Devastated, blaming everyone but herself. Margaret paused. Faith, don't carry guilt for this. It isn't your doing. I knew she was right. Knowing and feeling, though, were two different things. The family had splintered. Texts pinged back and forth in frantic clusters. Some defended Brooke. She was stressed. People make mistakes. Others were appalled. Who says such things about their own grandfather? My mother hadn't spoken to anyone since that night. According to Margaret, she had shut herself in her bedroom and stopped answering calls. A week later, unexpected messages began arriving on my phone. Cousin Linda. Faith, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I had no idea. Uncle Robert. Your grandfather was right about you. I should have listened. Even Aunt Patricia from Ohio. I owe you an apology. We all believed the wrong person. I read each one with a tangle of emotions. Gratitude, sorrow, a peculiar emptiness. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To be believed? To be vindicated? Yet victory tasted nothing like triumph. My family had fractured. My sister stood alone. My mother was drowning in grief and shame. I'd won, so why did it feel as though everyone had lost? That night, I sat in my apartment cradling a cup of cold tea, staring out the window into darkness. I didn't want this, Grandpa, I whispered. I only wanted the truth. But the truth, I was learning, carried a steep price, and now we were all paying it. 2 weeks after the memorial dinner, Brooke texted me. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the part that still remembered us as little girls shaping sandcastles beside the lake, clung to a faint hope. I agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop downtown, neutral ground.
She was already seated when I arrived. She looked unrecognizable. Unwashed hair, bare face, deep shadows beneath her eyes. No trace remained of the polished marketing executive from 3 months earlier. I sat across from her. Neither of us ordered. Faith? Her voice came out rough. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I blinked. What I've done to you? Craig left me. The whole family thinks I'm a monster. Aunt Patricia uninvited me to Thanksgiving. Tears welled in her eyes. My entire life is collapsing, and it's your fault. I exhaled slowly. Brooke, I didn't force you to say those words about Grandpa. I was venting. She slapped her palm against the table. Everyone says things they don't mean. It was one comment at his birthday party. I kept my tone even. You wished him dead while he's still 50 feet away. Then you spent the next 11 months acting like nothing happened. I didn't know he heard. Does that make it better? Silence stretched between us. For a fleeting second, I thought she might apologize, might show real remorse. Instead, she whispered, You ruined everything. I stood, placed enough cash on the table to cover a coffee neither of us had ordered. When you're ready to take responsibility, not just for the consequences, but for what you actually said, you know where to find me. I walked out without looking back. Some bridges can only be rebuilt by the person who set them ablaze. If you've ever had to draw a hard boundary with someone you love, family, a friend, anyone who crossed the line they shouldn't have, then you understand this isn't easy. It's never about winning. It's about protecting your own heart while leaving space for genuine change. Drop the word boundaries in the comments if you know exactly what Faith is feeling right now. And if this story is striking close to home, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Now, let's see what comes next. 1 month later, my mother called. She said, I want to see you. Please come home. I drove to her house the following morning, the same house where I'd grown up feeling unseen, the same house I'd fled a year earlier with tears burning my cheeks. Mom waited in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she once baked birthday cakes and years later accused me of tearing the family apart. She looked older, diminished. The sharp edges I remembered had worn down into something fragile. Sit down, she said softly. Please. I sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wall clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Then my mother said, I was wrong. I looked up. The lake lay perfectly still, a flawless mirror catching every shade of the sky. I parked on the gravel drive and sat there a long while, simply looking. This place was mine now, not because I had seized it from anyone, but because Grandpa had chosen to entrust it to me. I climbed the porch steps, turned the key, and stepped inside. The cabin welcomed me with its familiar scents: cedar, aged books, the faint whisper of Grandma's lavender sachets. Dust motes drifted lazily in the slanting afternoon light. I moved through the rooms slowly, reverently. The kitchen where Grandpa flipped pancakes on Sunday mornings, the living room where he patiently taught me chess, the porch where he'd spend hours watching the water, coffee in hand. At last I reached his study. I settled into his chair, opened the drawer where I'd first discovered the letter, empty now, yet not truly empty. I drew out my copy of the letter and read the final paragraph once more. The cabin is yours, Faith. Not because Brooke doesn't deserve it, though she doesn't, but because you were the only one who ever saw me as a person, not a burden, not a price tag, just your grandfather. I pressed the paper against my heart. I kept my promise, I whispered to the quiet room. I saved it for you, for Dad, for Grandma. Outside, a soft wind stirred the trees. The lake lapped gently at the dock. And somewhere, I like to believe, Grandpa was smiling. I remained at the cabin until the stars appeared. For the first time in more than a year, peace settled over me like a warm blanket. The following weekend, Aunt Margaret drove out to visit. We sat on the porch in Grandpa's old rocking chairs, blankets draped across our laps against the crisp autumn air. Steam curled from our mugs of tea. The lake shimmered orange and rose in the dying light. "He would be so proud of you," Margaret said quietly. I shook my head. "I don't know. I tore the family apart." "No, Faith," she turned to face me. "The truth did that, and the truth needed to be spoken." We rocked in companionable silence. A loon called across the water, its voice echoing long and lonely. "What are your plans for this place?" she asked eventually. I'd thought about it constantly. "I want to keep it exactly as it is, open to family, to anyone who wants to come and remember Grandpa the way he deserved to be remembered. Even Brooke, especially Mom." I took a sip of tea. "We're working on things. It's slow, but she came here last week, first time since Dad died." Margaret smiled gently. "That's something." I continued. "She cried for 2 hours straight, but afterwards she said it felt like she could finally breathe again." We watched the sun slip below the tree line. "You know, your grandfather set boundaries too. Did you know that?" I looked at her. "In 1987, his brother asked him for money to cover gambling debts. Walter told him no. They didn't speak for 10 years. She knit my eyes. But Walter never regretted it. He said, "Some things are worth protecting, even if it costs you." I gave a small smile. "Sounds like boundaries run in the family." "The best things do." We stayed on that porch until the stars came out, just as Grandpa used to do. Some legacies have nothing to do with property at all. 6 months after the memorial dinner, my life looked entirely different. I still worked my shifts at St. Andrew's Hospital, still held frightened patients' hands through the worst nights. But every weekend now, I drove to the cabin. Sometimes alone. I'd read on the porch, fish from the dock, fall asleep to the sigh of wind through the pines. Sometimes Mom came with me. Our conversations remained careful, still mending, but she laughed now. She spoke of Dad without tears. One day, she even brought out some of his old fishing tackle from storage. "He would have wanted it here," she said, "where it belongs." Other family members began to visit too. Uncle Robert brought his grandchildren to splash in the lake. Cousin Linda helped me repair the weathered dock. Even Aunt Patricia made the long drive from Ohio. "I judged you unfairly," she told me. "I hope you can forgive me someday." I already have, and I meant it. Brooke never reached out again. According to Margaret, she moved to a different city, started fresh where no one knew her history. I hoped, truly hoped, she found some measure of peace, but I stopped waiting for her call. Some relationships can only be rebuilt when the other person is ready to do the necessary work. One Sunday afternoon, I hung a small wooden sign beside the cabin door. I'd carved it myself, letter by careful letter. "Where love lives, memories stay." I stepped back and studied my work. This cabin held 50 years of my family's story. Grandma's laughter echoing off the water, Dad's first unsteady steps across the floorboards, Grandpa's quiet wisdom shared over morning coffee. And now, at last, my own chapter. Not the overlooked daughter, not the thief, not the villain, just Faith, the one who stayed, the one who was seen. It was nearly sunset when I settled into Grandpa's rocking chair one final time. The lake glowed gold. The trees stood as black silhouettes against a fiery sky. Nearby, a woodpecker drummed its evening cadence. I thought back over the past 18 months, that phone call at 3:47 a.m., the funeral where my name was never spoken, the will reading that upended everything, the relentless texts, the sleepless nights when I almost believed I was the monster they described. Then the letter, the truth, the dinner where silence finally broke. I thought of Brooke somewhere out there, rebuilding, of Mom learning, slowly, painfully, to truly see me, of the family members who had apologized, reconnected, and begun to heal. I thought of Grandpa. "You knew, didn't you?" I said to the empty air. "You knew they would come after me. You knew I'd need proof." A light wind rose, rustling the leaves like a soft reply. You didn't just leave me a cabin, Grandpa. You left me permission. Permission to stop making myself smaller for people who would never value it.